week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. We're recording here on the afternoon of February 2nd, 2018. It's Candlemas. And for those out there in the pagan world, it's Groundhog Day. And if you want to learn about Candlemas and what this day means, it has significance. You should subscribe to The American System. You got a whole briefing on how this holiday, the reason there's any kind of holiday, be it Groundhogs or Candlemas, that's Pope Gelasius I, the guy who invented the theory of the separation of powers. This is very timely because that's the separation of powers under attack by Trump, Nunez, and their gang of adventurers. So that's today. Now, the other thing that's happening today, of course, is it's going to go down in history as the Groundhog Day crash. Yes, indeed. We have been warning you that corrections and market plunges, market breaks are on the horizon, and lo and behold, one of them is now upon us. As we begin speaking, the Dow is down 635 points. One interesting note from MarketWatch is that the point loss registered already today is greater than the point loss of the Dow on Black Monday, October 1987. Now, of course, that's with a market which was much lower than this one. So a Dow point today is less percentage-wise than a Dow point in 1987, but it does give you some idea. The loss on the Dow this week is estimated to be more than 1,000 points. It's well below 26,000 now. We're at about 2583 as we speak. This is the worst week for the Dow in 2 years. All 30 stocks of the Dow Jones, quote, industrial, quote, unquote, average, not really industrial, but the Dow 30, let's call them that, they're all down. And the S&P is also on track for the worst week in 2 years. Now, what happened? Well, these are the contradictions of reality. We have been talking for the last several days on the other show, on the American System Daily program, and you can catch that at americansystem.tv, americansystem.tv. Go there and catch up on the past week. Certainly. Go back and catch our analysis on the State of the Union. There's lots of analysis on the State of the Union also on Twitter. Webster G. Tarpley on Twitter has the lowdown on that with lots and lots of live tweeting and live fact-checking from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But here's what is now the case. We have been talking about this issue of the yield curve. The yield curve meaning the interest rates on federal securities, Treasury securities, generally Treasury bonds, maybe some Treasury notes too. Treasury bills, less relevant, but Treasury notes and bonds. And the question is, those interest rates have been creeping up, up, up. And of course they creep up, right? Who would not demand more interest to lend to an enterprise with Trump at the top? A banqueteur, someone who has actually theorized default, right? He has advocated default. He said, yeah, we can renegotiate, force those rates, the principal down, right? He's already talked in his campaign about giving investors a haircut. Well, that has not happened in the history of the United States, and this may be looming under Trump for reasons that we've been following. So, the yield curve. Normally, the yield curve, when you look from the shorter maturities on the left to the 30-year bond on the right, there's a gradual increase in the interest rates that are demanded, that are paid. And that's normal. Now, what has been happening is that has been flattening. In other words, the short end has been going up, 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 and has been overtaking the long end. And that is generally considered a sure sign of a recession. And the recession becomes almost inevitable if you get the inverted yield curve, where the short-term lending is more expensive in interest rate than the long-term lending. If the short-term lending goes way up, it means that the government has to finance tremendous amounts of short-term paper. It means that companies are desperately trying to borrow short-term money to avoid bankruptcy. It can also mean that people want to park their money in the long bond and ride out a recession or depression, locking in those somewhat higher interest rates in the long bond, which otherwise might come down. You get the idea. Once the yield curve is flat, recession ahead. Once the yield curve inverts, then the recession is often upon you. Purely technical, but relevant. Now, that's what happened today. The job report today was 200,000 jobs created in the month of January. That's very mediocre. Remember Candidate Trump? Candidate Trump said 300,000. Well, this is a little bit better than December. December was wretched, 148,000 jobs. And we're even told that the November-December job creation under Trump has now been revised downward, minus 24,000 jobs. Oh, boy. But the 200,000 jobs plus just a very modest inkling of wage increases in January, this was sufficient to drive the price of the 10-year bond up to about 2.85. It drove the price of the 30-year bond above 3%, where it has not been for a while. And on that basis, money fled the stock market and rushed into treasury bonds, or just rushed away, because the dollar is falling under Trump. So treasury bonds falling, dollar falling. Vote of no confidence in the Trump regime. This gang of adventurers, amateurs, grifters, the various Mnuchins, and so forth. So this is ominous. Now, right now, the yield curve is the 5-year is at 2.6%, the 10-year is at 2.85%, and the 30-year is at 3.08. So that is remarkably flat, right? It was considered flat when the difference between the 10-year and the 30-year was 0.6%, right? 60 basis points. That was considered flat. Now, this is about 25 or fewer basis points. So this is extremely flat. And what you could have then is some untoward event, and the 10-year rate will jump above the 30-year rate, and that will scare the hell out of a lot of market technicians and chartists, I guess we call them. The stocks of the energy sector are down 3%. There's a lot of losses by the banks, and we'll be catching up with that as soon as we catch up with the other deadly crisis into which the Trump regime has now blundered. And we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Hey, we have a very grim scene in Wall Street. We are told now the Dow has been walloped, 630 points down, the worst week in 2 years. Fear is finally driving the VIX higher. The complacency which Trump has cited as one of his plus points, right? One of his talking points. Business confidence is high. Well, complacency, right? Yeah. Well, now that's eroding. The VIX, the volatility index, the fear index is going up. Exxon has registered the biggest loss in 6 years after their earnings have failed to live up to expectations. And we've got a significant sell-off, and, we'll just send you to look at all the technical details of that. The political significance is clear. Trump has lashed himself to the carcass of this market, like Captain Ahab with the white whale. He's lashed himself on there. And, you thought you were riding it up. Guess what? Now you're going to be riding it down. There is no more critical point to get rid of this regime than to end this stock market bubble, which is now really the only talking point. Because as we saw in the State of the Union, and we talked about this exhaustively, I'm not going to have time to repeat it all today, but the only talking point economically for the Trump administration is we've got this great bubble going. We've got a bubble. We've got an asset bubble, a stock bubble, and so forth, and that's a great thing. No, it's not. That's not an asset. A stock bubble is a public menace, and the trick would be to deflate it gradually. But, of course, the Trump gang doesn't think about that. They really think that's wealth. Well, it's not. So this is the markets registering through the bond market and through the stock market, because both are down. Stocks down, bonds down. That's not easy to do, but Don has done it. He has come up with quite a feat. So vote of no confidence by markets in Don. And we've also got, of course, world markets, right? Europe and so forth, responding in a similar way. So that's the framework for everything else now. In other words, the genius of Trump was a rising market. This is now quite possibly a falling market. The watershed has quite possibly been passed. I'm sure that the Trump people have discovered the plunge protection team, the infamous PPT. And I imagine that Trump is on the phone right now with the plunge protection team saying, you've got to protect me. Where's my Roy Cohn, but where's my plunge protection team? Where's my stock buying authority? We know what this is, right? This is the Brady system. Nicholas Brady, Secretary of the Treasury for Bush the Elder, created the President's Working Group on Financial Markets after the crash of 1987. And the idea is that they use Federal Reserve money to buy stocks semi-surreptitiously. They came out into the open right after 9/11 saying, don't worry, your stocks are not going to crash because we won't let them. We have the PPT. Japan, of course, has a stock buying operation which is public. But I'm sure the PPT will try to come in and ameliorate things. And that may be going on right now to the extent that there's any kind of a bounce back. Right now we're about 550, so we're about 85 points off the low. I'm sure we can chalk that up to PPT. But the PPT cannot, it's like King Canute, right? You cannot tell the tide that they are ordered to stop, right? You can do a lot, but you can't do that. All right. So now we have the inevitable Nunes memo, or should we call it the cash memo? I'll explain that one in a little while, right? But the cash memo has now been published as of shortly after midday today. Well, let's start with the big picture. The big picture is constitutional crisis. This is a constitutional crisis. This is the question of the rule of law, and very specifically, is somebody above the rule of law? Is there some person or gang who are immune to the law, above the law, outside the law, beyond the law? And the answer to that has got to be no, because as soon as the answer to that is yes, you are in anarchy. You are in the war of all against all. You're in the realm of Thomas Hobbes and the bellum omnium contra omnes, the war of all against all. And that's now the issue. If we look for a second at this primitive document, and again, it's the Cash memo, we can see, even an illiterate could see here, where this is allegedly heading. It is the discovery of the pathetic case of Carter Page. Carter Page is now the hero of civil liberties. He is a victim. Boy, is he a victim. And the idea is, was there malfeasance by the FBI and the Department of Justice in going to the FISA court, that is to say, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, duly constituted back, I believe, in 1978, was there malfeasance? So the relevant paragraph, it's this. The FBI and DOJ obtained one initial FISA warrant targeting Carter Page and then 3 FISA renewals from the FISA court, right? The FISC. Now, this is because Carter Page was essentially one of the usual suspects when it came to this, what can we say, shady dealings with the people in Moscow. Carter Page, and we've seen him, lived in Moscow in 2004, worked for an investment banking firm. In 2013, Carter Page got himself onto the screen of the FBI. He was interviewed by FBI agents about discussions that he had had with a certain Russian, Viktor Podobny. And Podobny, in 2015, was charged by the Justice Department with trying to recruit Carter Page as an intelligence source for the Russians. And we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tuffney here in Washington, D.C., urging you to keep up with this analysis Monday through Thursday of each week. Go to AmericanSystem.tv, AmericanSystem.tv. So here we have the text of this sleazy, amateurish, crude, primitive, fallacy of composition, distortions, omissions, you name it. The key sentence: Comey signed 3 FISA applications for the FBI. McCabe signed 1 for the DOJ. Sally Yates, Dana Bente, and Rod Rosenstein each signed 1 or more FISA applications on behalf of the Department of Justice, all targeting this waif, this gamin, Carter Page. We'll get to him in a minute. So, Rod Rosenstein. Now, here's the thing. People of goodwill out there know who Bob Mueller is, right? And I've told you, I've been aware of him since college. He was in the Princeton class of 1966. And at that point, he volunteered for Vietnam, which was a very singular thing to do. But there we were. It was 66 to 67. So, but Mueller, by now, Mueller is a famous person. Mueller is one of the most famous people in the country. I would submit Bob Mueller is an authentic American folk hero. Bob Mueller is an authentic American folk hero. Trump, of course, by contrast, is a kind of, if he's a Peck's bad boy, he's lucky, but he's a dubious, sleazy character. Mueller is protected by all kinds of mechanisms, including the fact that he's a folk hero. Here's what we need, though. People out there, you've got to be guided by reason, not just by emotion, not just by likes and dislikes, but by calculation, strategy, intelligence. Again, human reason, dialectical reason. Rosenstein is as important as Mueller because Rosenstein is the person to whom Mueller reports. Rosenstein right now is the only government official of the standard bureaucracy who can tell Mueller what to do. He has got to approve or at least not interfere with the various choices that Mueller makes concerning witnesses, avenues of exploration, grand juries to be impaneled from Washington, D.C. to Alexandria, Virginia, Eastern Virginia to Southern District of New York in Manhattan to Eastern District of New York in Brooklyn, things like this. What we've got to do is take the protective umbrella that has come from groups like MoveOn.org and from this other one, the March, right? There's this other group. You can see I've got it written up on my Twitter at Webster G. Tarpley. Another group which is looking towards possible demonstrations, mass mobilizations, things like this. Here we go. It's called the March for Truth. Marchfortruth.info. So you got MoveOn.org, March for Truth, and any others, right? Think of some others. If you find them, let me know. We're not endorsing any of these. We're simply saying these are the groups, right? I don't see any reactionary gang of libertarians planning to go out and protest the stuff that Trump is doing because they're immoral, right? They're rotten. Sorry, that's the way it is. So you got to work with what you find, right? People, they write in, they say, oh, no, that's Soros. I don't care who it is. It can be Beelzebub. He can have horns and a tail. But we got to fight Trump, and we got to, above all, protect Mueller so we can restore legality, avoid dictatorship. How about that? So Rosenstein has got to be brought under the umbrella, right? This is not a nuclear umbrella, obviously. It is the umbrella of political protection. You might say, well, I don't like Rosenstein, right? That guy doesn't inspire confidence. I don't care. Time to be calculating, think strategically. This, of course, this is Trump's problem. He can't do that. This whole thing that we're witnessing is actually very poorly planned. It's a very poor targeting, very ineffective, and will probably backfire, but not unless people mobilize. So we're saying extend the umbrella of political protection to Rosenstein, because if Rosenstein goes down, then Mueller can be boxed in and sabotaged from right above him, and that would avoid then Trump would get the benefit of paralyzing the Mueller investigation without the mass opprobrium and rage and demonstrations that he would get if he just fired Mueller. Get the point? And I'm talking to you, mushhead organizations out there, mushhead leaders. Rosenstein has got to be put on the same level, right? You've got to extend your political protection umbrella to Rosenstein in exactly the same way you've done it for Mueller. And you've got to educate your people about why this is so. Now, that's the political point. Because if this happens, if Rosenstein is fired and they put in a Trump stooge, maybe not possible to get that Trump stooge through the Congress, right, through the Senate for confirmation. But then you can get a a Trump stooge who is a Senate-confirmed official of some other part of the government? How about somebody like Scott Pruitt? How about that? Would that be good? I don't think so. So that's the danger. And then that person would simply sabotage everything that Mueller says, right? You can't talk to this witness. You can't look at Trump's finances, right? We know the drill, all that stuff. So that's the political mobilization, right? We're not commentators. We are players. And we want to get in there and defend Mueller and Rosenstein because these are essentially the same cause. Now, concerning this memo, what can we say? It was already coming from Axios yesterday. Let's call this chapter Much Ado About a Nothing Burger. Much Ado About a Nothing Burger. I think there's a play that sounds like that, right? But this is not even Shakespearean. This is sort of low comedy. This is slapstick. This is a nothing burger. It's a dud. It's a yawn. It's a crashing bore. My God, a tissue of lies, distortions, omissions, and so forth. And as Comey said, what? That's it? Is that the best you can do? That's pretty weak. That's a pretty pathetic gambit, right? This is the problem of this hype, right? And the rising expectations, right? All those rednecks out there, all of those dupes who were told it's going to be worse than Watergate, gang. It's not worse than Watergate. I don't see anything untoward or unusual in what they're writing about. I just don't see it. And in particular, concerning Mueller, they don't lay a glove on Mueller. They don't come close to Mueller. There's nothing in here that would undermine Mueller. But, of course, that's, as we've just tried to say, that's not really the immediate idea. That's the medium to longer term idea. The target of this is Rosenstein. And what did they do? Did they get some hits on Rosenstein? I don't think they did. I think this is a complete nothing. This is a haymaker, they think, that goes into mid-air. That's all it is. A dud, a nothing burger, a yawn. And we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So they do not lay a glove on Mueller. And the only thing they can pin on Rosenstein is that he, among other things, right, used some research by Christopher Steele, the infamous dossier, as one, we believe, of multiple sources to motivate asking these judges to continue a wiretap on Carter Page that had already been enacted 2-3 times, that might go back to 2013, 2014, when old Carter was under the scrutiny of the FBI, because the Russians considered Carter Page a useful idiot. And indeed, I think there are some tapes there in the background about what an idiot Carter Page is, right? A rich fool in many ways. So, what's the big beef here? Well, it's that some of these reports about Trump come from people who don't like Trump. Horrors! It's like saying if the police come to your house and say, here, we have a report from your next door neighbor that there's criminal activity going on here, you can't say, get out of my house, I'm in a feud with my next door neighbor, therefore anything coming from my next door neighbor is invalid, inadmissible, and you get out of here because this person doesn't like me. And, of course, the specific form that this takes is paid informants. So the idea is in the document, and which it's called the Cash Memo, we'll tell you why in just a minute, The idea here is, the big beef is that the dossier was paid for by the FBI. The FBI, it's claimed here, gave $160,000. This was money was given to Christopher Steele by the Democratic National Committee, by the Clinton campaign, through the law firm Perkins Coie and the research firm Fusion GPS to obtain derogatory information on Trump's ties. So the idea is, yes, this is Oppo research. This is normal. Oppo research paid for generally by the opposing candidate to find out things. And the question then becomes the validity of the things allegedly discovered, not the motivation. Now, this is a very important point. We'll try to get back to this in a minute. But in the world of reality, what is important are the facts, not the motive for the facts, and not the state of mind of the investigator. No. What's important is this stuff true? Yes or no? Not, do they want to be mean to our hero Don? Because this is his rap, right? That he's described as a river of grievances. So the obvious case is the FBI and other federal agencies, right? And this is, you can think of this what you want. It's unfortunate, but this is a fallen world. So federal agencies, FBI, Drug Enforcement Administration, on and on and on, and local police, my God, state police, local police, they pay informants. Yes, there are paid informants, people who snitch. They're paid snitches. They're people in the underworld sometimes who snitch and spill the beans. They're stool pigeons, and the reason they do this is they get money. So here's an article from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I think this is Mellon, isn't it? The federal programs that pay people to tell on others, to snitch on others, amounted to about $500 million during 2014. 500 million smackaroonies in 2014 paid out by FBI, Department of Justice, and so forth. There's one fund in the Department of Justice of $29 million. There's they get money from the asset forfeitures where the drug lord gets his yacht confiscated. They sell that and pay the informers who help to track this character down. So this is simply it. If you didn't have paid informants, if the FBI were not paying people to get intelligence, they would say that they couldn't do what they do. Now, again, maybe you don't like that whole system. It's not ideal. But this is it. This is it. So just realize that's the way it is. That's the way it is in life. Okay? So here we have Steele apparently getting money. At a certain point got money, perhaps, from the FBI. Certainly got money from Hillary Clinton. Certainly through these 10 different mediations. And then also then at some point, it's not so clear in here actually, but the allegation is that at some point the FBI also paid. Okay, you're not an agent. You're a source. You're an informant, right? And this is the way police agencies all over the world work, and not since yesterday. Go back and read Balzac. Go back and read the Père Goriot, right? Old Goriot and the Pension Vauquier in Paris in the 1830s, and you'll see that the place has got police informants in there who do it for money, not for ideology, not for belief, and so forth. So the more general point is that when you're evaluating evidence, the snitch reports, in other words, people who are questioned, sometimes they volunteer, they want money. Sometimes they volunteer because they have animus. But other times you have to go and interrogate them, and then they tell you, because they feel they have to, because you're squeezing them. The point is not going to be, are they pure? Are they sincere? Their motives are decidedly secondary or tertiary. What counts is the accuracy of the information, okay? The facts. And on this memo has absolutely nothing to offer. They do not treat, they do not discuss whether it's true or not, right? Was there this collaboration, right? This collusion, this conspiracy against the U.S. 2016 elections? It's not entertained. It's not an issue. They don't care. And what about, the salacious stuff? What about that? It's not important. Doesn't register. Doesn't mean anything. Whether it's true or not. Can there be blackmail? Is he compromised? All this stuff. No interest in any of that. It's only that the process that led to this was characterized by people who had mixed motives, maybe bad motives. And again, this doesn't matter. We've often talked about here that people often do the right thing for the wrong reasons. And in this fallen world, you got to take that. You can't say, no, I realize this is very valuable and could save the country. But, of course, because your motives are tainted, I'm going to pretend I don't know this. So the dud, the yawn, the nothing burger, the crashing bore, nothing on Mueller, and only a crude attempt to interfere with Rosenstein. So that's where we are. Now, we've got to do a further discussion on Carter Page, and we've got to do one on Kash Patel, the actual author, according to some, of this document. We'll be back with our next hour in just a minute on World Crisis. Second hour of World Crisis Radio here on Groundhog Day. We are facing a constitutional crisis. What Trump has done today by declassifying this pathetic piece of fan fiction is nevertheless likely to figure as another article in the coming bill of impeachment. And of course, the only possible scenario is this. If Trump should proceed to attack Rosenstein, firing him, replacing him with some stooge, some wrecker saboteur, and or if he attacks Mueller directly, well then, as Cokie Roberts, right-wing person in my book, but been in Washington for a while, quite recently, I guess it must have been last week on ABC, Cokie Roberts says if Trump does those things, the Democrats will win Congress in November, and they will proceed to impeach Trump in the springtime, about a year from now. So those are the stakes. Now, let's just, a couple of other things. The Democrats have their memo. I don't know, in the face of this lawlessness, shouldn't the Democrats release their memo? Feinstein released some testimony without kowtowing and groveling for Senator Grassley, and she's another right-winger, so come on. Schiff, aren't you being a little bit too formalistic? Schiff, we appreciate your work, but isn't it now time to show a little bit of aggressivity for extreme evils, extreme remedies? And this simply means releasing the document you have. If you want to cover up some of the secret parts, you can do that too. Some of that black ink, so-called redacting. The FBI Association today has doubled down on their support for the Bureau and for Wray. They say today, after this thing came out, we will not be distracted by these political events. Now, the question of the targeting of Rosenstein is not speculation. In a brief pool spray, photo op with sound and video, Trump was asked, do you continue to have confidence in the DAG, Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein? Trump's cryptic response, you figure that one out. Sounds grim. And again, we must extend the umbrella of political protection, mass mobilization, and indeed impeachment threat to protect Rosenstein in all senses, just as important as Mueller, although he lacks the folk hero status. Schiff, of course, condemns what the Republicans have done. Carter Page, we'll get to him in a minute, but Carter Page put out a wonderful communique expressing his love for Nunes. And here, McCain. McCain says, no American interest has been served by this. This helps Putin and Putin alone. Good. McCain, hang on, and your services may be needed. In some ways, we can call this a Valentine from Trump and the Republican Party to Putin. It's a love note. So we've got any number of things, right? All the people in the intelligence community, right, be it Brennan, be it Clapper, they're all attacking this. They're appalled, clearly. But already last night, Axios was saying that there are people in the Trump White House who are afraid that this is anticlimactic, underwhelming. That's our view. This is the nothing burger. This is indeed the yawn. Now remember, as we go through this, objective knowledge is better than subjective knowledge. I mean, both are in your head, but to be in touch with objectivity is better. So the facts. Did Trump conspire? Did he collude? This is much more important than were the motives of the people drawing up these accusations. Were they pure? Were they self-interested? Did they have animus? Those are things the jury has to figure out, right? When you put an informant on the stand and you say, here, we're going to testify, then the defense can say, well, look, you've gotten these benefits, right? You got off some charges or whatever it is. It's in the land of the soap opera that everything is reduced to individual motives and there is no objectivity. So, this is, of course, doubly reckless because it reveals the background of an ongoing criminal investigation in the realm of counterintelligence. Now, the memo, according to the Daily Beast, I think, and some others, certainly MSNBC, points out that they say that this is now the Cash memo. Now, let me just first say, the Cash is with a K. It's K-A-S-H, Cash memo. And the reason for this is it is thought to be largely the work of a certain Kash Patel, K-A-S-H Patel, a member of the Nunes staff. Now, who is Kash Patel? This is a really interesting story. So here we are. We're going back to an article by Adam Goldman in the Washington Post of February 11th, 2016. And here we go. We go in medias res. Get the picture? The federal judge was irritated. Quote, who is this Patel guy? Who is this Patel guy? He asked prosecutors at a meeting in his chambers at the federal courthouse in Houston to discuss a terrorism case that was going on and a lawyer for the defendant. Now, here we go. This is United States Federal District Judge Lynn Y. Hughes. And I don't know whether he's a Republican Democratic appointee. So the Patel guy turns out to be Kash Patel with a K, or name in full, Kashyap Patel, a prosecutor in the Justice Department's National Security Division in Washington, which oversees terrorism cases. And the assistant U.S. attorney in Houston, a guy called Imperato, said that he had lent Patel his account login so that the guy from Washington, Patel, could provide notice, I guess, to the judge that he was going to be involved. Well, this judge is not happy. I think Patel makes a bad impression. So District Judge, U.S. Federal District Judge Lynn Nettleton Hughes says, "Don't let those sons of bitches use your account." And then he turns to the court reporter, the transcript, "Put that in the record." Okay, so this is a clash. This is bad blood between a federal judge and this guy Kashyap Patel. Kashyap, now, of course, in the tradition of the Restoration comedy, right? If you're Sir Benjamin Whitwood, Kashyap, this would suggest that your mouth is for sale, that you're a mercenary spokes, Kashyap. So, yes, the yap is available for cash. Maybe that's it. I don't know. My Indo-European Sanskrit skills are perhaps letting me down a little bit. So this was a genuine clash. We don't need to go into all the details that led to this, but part of it is that the guy showed up in disarray. So here we go. Patel comes in, Houston. Judge says, "What are you doing here? What is your role in this? What is your role in this?" Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So we're just going through the saga of Kash Patel, reputedly one of the authors of this wretched document, which has been now presented with so much fanfare. Right? It's certainly a letdown, right? This is known in literature as the bathos, peribathos, the art of sinking in rhetoric, right? Bigger than Watergate, and then at the end, it's nothing much. So the other clash, we don't have to go through all the details of this, but when Patel came into the judge's chambers, "What are you doing here? What's your role in this?" "I'm a member of the trial team from the counterterrorism section." So he says, "You're not a member of the trial team," says the judge. "But this has been going on for a month. You haven't been here." And then the judge to Patel, "Where's your tie? Where's your suit?" "I'm sorry, sir. I had to fly in from Central Asia." Right? Undoubtedly a great mission. "What did you wear on the plane?" "I wore this. This is all I had." "Why didn't you wear a suit?" "I didn't have one with me." So then he says, "Show me your passport. Let me see if you really were in Central Asia." And then the judge to Patel, "If you want to be a lawyer, dress like a lawyer." "I will, sir." "Act like a lawyer." He says, "Why do they send you here at public expense? They have to fly you down here. You're just one more non-essential employee from Washington. You don't add a bit of value, do you? You may be excused. Out. Scram. Amscray." So the idea is that what we've learned about Patel is that he was in this national security part of the DOJ, but then he wanted to be hired by the National Security Council, but he couldn't make the grade. And then he ends up with Nunes and is now the author of this fan fiction piece that we're examining today, right? Which has been so relentlessly hyped up. He's a fanatic. He's described as a man on a mission. He's a fanatic. He's an ideological fanatic. We don't know exactly what the story is in detail, but that's the idea. And a sloppy fanatic. Here we go. Red State. Red State, a reactionary site, I think somewhat critical of Trump, but not really in our book. So here we have an article, 2 o'clock today. A significant inaccuracy in the memo calls its credibility into question. And the idea here is, in the memo, we read, this is point 4, in early 2017, Director Comey briefed President-elect Trump on a summary of the Steele dossier. We know this, right? This is the intelligence bosses went to Trump Tower, then they departed, but Comey stayed behind and said here privately, we have the Steele dossier, you need to know what it is, it's out there, right? This is a heads up, right? It's a courtesy. Trump gets a summary of the Steele dossier, and I'm quoting now from the fan fiction, from the memo, quote, even though it was, according to his 2017 June testimony, that's Comey, quote, internal quote now, salacious and unverified, close quote. Now, this suggests that Comey says the entire Steele dossier is salacious and unverified. Wrong, exaggerated, distorted, not the whole thing. Comey says in testimony, part of it is salacious and unverified. This is thought to be the part referring to what we're going to call undinism. Look it up. Undinism. This is the part that was of great interest to Saturday Night Live, which Colbert went to investigate. You know what we're talking about. But this is called undinism. By the way, you'll be amazed how many very evil people had undinism. We'll have a special unit about that in the future. But the idea is that this character, Kash Patel, is, he's sort of an adventurer in the federal bureaucracy, right? I'm thinking of some other people in recent years. I had some people who really didn't know what they were doing, but they got on because they were willing to say incendiary things about Iraq or whatever it was. So that's Patel. Now we've got Carter Page. Carter Page is now going to be a folk hero of the reactionaries. When I look at Carter Page, I think of these things they used to have in the 50s and 60s in the New York papers. Send this boy to camp. Send this boy to camp. Carter Page. He is the hero of civil liberties, right? Because everything now revolves around the civil liberties of Carter Page, not the right of the American people to know if their White House, their presidency, their government has been successfully penetrated by the KGB. No, that does not exist. There is no such question. The only question is, what's with the civil rights of Carter Page? Now, as we said, he was considered to be a person of limited mental capacity that the Russians wanted to inquire. They wanted to try to bring him into their orbit. Right? That's all stated in numerous public sources. So Don has placed his bet on Carter Page, and once again, is this? You'd think that if you wanted to have a poster boy, you'd pick, some blue-collar guy who was treated unfairly, or you can think of all the different ones, right, that would be more to the point of what Trump is selling. But here's now Carter Page, is somewhat confused, right? He's known as Loopy or Goofy, and he's been on television a lot. He's evasive. He doesn't give you straight answers. You've seen all this stuff. Anyway, he's Carter Page. So that's who they decide to pick. In other words, the central. It's funny. They don't say, although Russiagate is a really big thing. The thing we're going to focus on is the application for one or two or more FISA warrants to electronic surveillance, wiretaps, on Carter Page on October 21st, 2016. Now, the irony is that this cannot be the origin of it because the probe started, according to Comey, if it's true, July 2016. So this is an afterthought. This did not start the probe. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Come back to World Crisis Radio. You know, this is so dramatic. The saga of Carter Page as the opponent of the deep state. We're already looking ahead to the movie that will be made out of this. And, of course, a very important question will be which prominent actor can be given the role of Carter Page. And we've thought a lot about this over the past 24 because it was clear this thing with Carter Page was the central part of the story, and there were already different schools of thought. One group says that only Woody Allen could do justice to Carter Page. Another group says no, Justin Bieber would be a better bet. And I'm sure there are other candidates, right? There's going to be a great competition among the leading actors of the age to see who gets to play the role of Carter Page in the inevitable movie, right? We've seen The Post, right? Tom Hanks as Ben Bradley, Meryl Streep as Katharine Graham. Well, here's an epic for our time. It's the hero of liberty and Americanism and civil rights. It's Carter Page. So, now remember, the FISA court is largely a bunch of reactionaries. The estimate is that 80% of the FISA judges are Republicans. So, the big rap on Steele, this is now point 3 of this fan fiction piece. The really damning information about Steele is that the FBI broke with him because he had talked to several journalists, right? And this includes David Korn for an October 30th, 2016 article in Mother Jones, right on the verge of the election. FBI said, okay, that's it. We can't talk to you anymore. And somehow the idea is that the allegation is that all of this stuff should have been put in the application. The application is not the exhaustive catalog of everything that's happened in the case. You've got to remember, what is this now? It simply says we need to investigate further, and that includes electronic surveillance. So we're asking, we feel that we have probable cause for electronic surveillance. And again, the entire biography of every source, the biography, political opinions, Federal Election Commission records of contributions to campaigns, how you said you voted, this cannot be included for every person involved. It's just crazy. But, of course, this is the land of the paranoids and the low information voters. So here's the idea. Steele was terminated as a source by the FBI, but remained in contact with the Department of Justice by then Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr, OHR, senior DOJ official who had worked closely with Yates and later Rosenstein. There he is again, Rosenstein. Yates, of course, gone after the first week. Shortly after the election, the FBI began interviewing Orr, documenting his communications with Steele. For example, in 2016, September, Steele admitted to Orr his feelings against then-candidate Trump when Steele said he was, quote, desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president. Well, yeah, him and 53 or 55% of the American people, including probably more than that, right? So that's heresy. You're going to kick everybody out of the FBI who has ever been a Democrat? Then you're going to have that's the Gestapo, right? If it's all one party. So clear evidence of Steele's bias. Look, bias is not enough. you've got to show that specific decisions were made in a wrong, illegal manner. Illegal. Because of the bias. The bias is not going to do it. You've got to actually show that it led to a distortion of actions. So there it is. Now, the other thing, of course, where did this all start? Did it start with Papadopoulos? Here we have now, we're in point 5. The Papadopoulos information triggered the opening of an FBI counterintelligence investigation in late July 2016 by FBI agent Peter Strzok. But, of course, Strzok is discredited, and he really was foolish, I would say. Strzok, you're a fool to write all these things. He was reassigned by Mueller for improper text messages with his mistress. This is not the language of the current age. FBI attorney Lisa Page, no relation to Carter Page, where they both demonstrated a clear bias against Trump and in favor of Clinton. I'm not sure. They have a bias against all sorts of people, right? And there's other countervailing evidence that Strzok was not a friend of Hillary Clinton, didn't act that way. Anyway, and they discussed with McCabe, they discussed an insurance policy against President Trump's election. I think my impression of that is this notion we had about a fear that if the entire documentation, the archive, the paperwork of the case were put in one place, the Trump gang would come in and try to destroy that obstruction of justice, but then you wouldn't be able to prove it. Remember, this was from the Post of the Times, that stuff was decentralized. It was farmed out. It was put in more than one place so that the Trump gang would not be able to destroy that relevant evidence and shut down the probe. But here, I got to repeat this again. There were two things, and they come to us, interestingly, from the London Guardian. Now, remember, the London Guardian, well-informed, right, benefiting certainly from the insights of British intelligence. They want to tell us that there's a second dossier. We reported that this past week. It has not gotten a whole lot of play over here, but this is this guy, Cody Shearer. Cody Shearer. It's interesting. If you know this Parade magazine, it's this little, what is it? Rotogravure, right? That's what it is. It comes with newspapers on Sunday. It comes with the Washington Post on Sunday. I guess that means they're part of the conspiracy and always have been. Anyway, the Washington Post, a right-wing newspaper, to be sure. But the story of Cody Shearer is that his father was Lloyd Shearer, for many years the editor of Parade magazine, right? And, of course, it's got a whole bunch of gossip, right? Walter Scott's personality parade and all this stuff. Been going on for years, decades. So Shearer, Cody Shearer wrote his own dossier. And the FBI, according to the Guardian, London Guardian, the FBI has the Cody Shearer dossier. What can we say? Certain elements corroborate the Christopher Steele 35-page compromat. Which parts? Well, it looks like the part about undonism, the part about those prostitutes and that bed and that coprophilia scatology, that seems to be in both dossiers, in the Steele, as we know, and in the Shearer. So there's another dossier. What are the Republicans going to do about that? Wouldn't it be time for some important publication or TV network to begin to take up the Cody Shearer dossier, because that it undercuts a whole bunch of assumptions that the Republicans have, right? That this was all made up by Steele. Back in a minute. Welcome back to our final segment of World Crisis Radio here. It's Groundhog Day, and we're talking about the Groundhog Day market break. This may go down in history similar to the Babson break of late summer 1929. Remember Babson, Roger Babson? He was known as the prophet. He was considered prophetic. He was the prophet of loss that year. And this may be the opening gun. If the yield curve inverts, let's remind ourselves, the yield curve flattening or inverting, what does it mean? It's time to hold on to your hat if this does happen. The inverted yield curve occurred in 1981. That was followed by the big Reagan recession, very grim. And, of course, many other reasons. 1991, the yield curve inverted in the wake of the crash of 1987, and this inverted yield curve of 1991 led to a real estate crisis. Trump can tell you all about that. That was when he began going bankrupt. His initial bankruptcies go back to this 91, 92. And then in 2006, we had another inverted yield curve, which signaled the approach of the crisis in 2007, 2008, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, and the rest. Now, the other thing we've got to keep track of, which we are keeping track of, especially day to day, and you should be joining us for this at AmericanSystem.tv, the bloody nose. During the course of this week, we discussed it on the daily program that Victor Cha, a former Bush official, Georgetown professor, had been scheduled to become U.S. ambassador to South Korea. Believe it or not, that critical post has been left empty by these dilettantes and bunglers of the Trump gang. But they had him, but now they've delisted him because he was guilty of lèse-majesté to Trump, in effect, without even mentioning him. Just that he said this thing about the bloody nose, this is folly. Forget about bloody nose. And we had, in late January, around the 25th of January, they had hearings in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee with Kissinger, with Schultz, and with Mr. Mud, Blood, and Deer. That is to say, the sidekick of Colin Powell. You know who I mean. Very much involved in Valerie Plame and all the rest. Anyway, I can't remember that guy's name, but he was the least of them. The main thing from Kissinger, he says, well, we're going to get to a point soon. This was Armitage. Kissinger says, we're going to get to a point soon where we're going to have to choose between military action in the short run and a range of other alternatives. And Kissinger points out the temptation to settle this with an attack on North Korea is going to be very great. It's going to be very tempting to attack North Korea. Kissinger says he thinks that's a mistake. You don't want to be in a war in a country that has a border with China, and it has a border with Russia. It's this place called Razin. So border with China, border with Russia. Those are the two land borders, and with South Korea, of course, right? But he says you don't want to do that unless you've got a large part of the world supporting the United States, or at least a large part of Asia. Now, that you might say, well, that could be South Korea, could be Japan, could be Taiwan, could be Vietnam, Indonesia, Australia, right? There are lots of places that could be involved. Philippines, right? But not every one of those is likely to be on board. So we have to worry about that little matter of World War III. And the other thing, of course, we went through this week was not only do we have the February 8th government shutdown funding deadline, right, where Ryan in White Sulphur Springs is telling the Myrmidons there, we're going to have another continuing resolution. And there are certain ultra-reactionaries of the Freedom Caucus, the Meadows Jordan gang. They say, no, we're not going to vote again and again for this. Right? We may vote no. And at this point, the government shutdown may emerge from a fight among Republicans, a falling out among thieves, in other words. Here's an interesting fun fact. The deficit under Trump, right, the great windbag and blowhard of fiscal responsibility sometimes, the deficit under Trump in 2017 has gone up. And the amount, and I want you to make a note of this, right, all you fundamentalists out there, the deficit, $666 billion. $666 billion. $666 billion was the U.S. deficit for 2017. So I think it means the calendar year, right? Fiscal year is more important, but I think this means the actual calendar year. So that's a fun fact. So there we are. Now, again, it's time to exercise vigilance. It's time to prepare, right? You should have a plan. If you hear that Rosenstein has been fired, or Mueller, and or both, then you should be ready to protest. You should begin telling congressmen and others, look, Rosenstein is just as important to us as Mueller. It's a mistake not to see it this way. Now, the last thing, though, concerning the origins of the probe, right? The Guardian has done us a service by publishing this stuff about the Cody Shearer dossier, and we want to see this, right? We want to see it. Then there's also the thing that we have referred to several times, and we've written it up on Twitter feed also. The Guardian, around the middle of April 15th of this past year, 2017, give or take, a couple of days, say that there were several sources. Now, this is before Papadopoulos. You can see that Papadopoulos is likely to be one of the sources of this. But the Guardian put out that the beginning of a formal counterintelligence investigation of the Trump campaign in July of 2016 was not based on the Steele dossier, or certainly not only the Steele dossier, but that it had been done in response to warnings, and they play up the fact that the British Communications Surveillance Headquarters, the so-called GCHQ, otherwise known as Cheltenham, it's that singular round, sort of a disc-like building, okay? The British GCHQ Cheltenham told U.S. intelligence, watch out, strange contacts between Trump people and Russia. Same thing from Australia. Now, Australia seems to be the one that we learned about later, months later, that was the Australian ambassador to Great Britain talking about his drunken conversation with Papadopoulos, and Papadopoulos says, the Russians have dirt on Hillary Clinton. But the total number of countries is 7. Britain, Australia, then come France, Germany, Poland, Netherlands, Estonia. 7 countries warned the United States that there was strange stuff going on between the Trump people and the Kremlin. And that's the origin, and that's, of course, what this silly piece of fan fiction does not explain. So, here we are. Watch out for those stocks. And we'll be back next week at this time. But watch out for the gathering crash. It looks like the Dow is closed down 666 points. 666 again. What can we conclude? We'll be back next week.